Many of you know me from the Rational Apprentice podcast. I was recording in here and doing a weekly podcast on the merger of science and human action. And then suddenly I stopped. And if you were wondering why I stopped, it was because we had a flood in the studio. It wasn't really a flood. What it was a broken pipe. And I'll show you the pipe in a minute. And I wanted to talk to you about all the damage that was done and what you can do to prevent something just like this from happening. Because let me tell you, it's not fun. Dealing with the insurance company is very difficult. It's a long process, and there's a lot to talk about. There are certain things that you should do and certain things that you shouldn't do. And I want to make sure that if you can mitigate problems before they happen, then you should definitely do that. Because when it comes to recording studios, when it comes to video studios, anything like that, there's lots of times there's gear that, sure, you can go to Sweetwater and you can buy replacement gear. But if it's vintage gear, if it's older gear, if it's modded or tweaked in any kind of way, or you just can't get it anymore, then you're out of luck. Insurance companies don't know the value of something that's got vintage value or sentimental value, or I used this to record this record back in the day, and that doesn't mean anything to an insurance company. So let's go through, first off, what happened in here, and second, what you can do to get through the process in the best way possible and get you up and running without overdue problems and without losing your shirt. Okay, so above this room, not directly over this room, but over there on the next floor up is a bathroom. We had finally planned a trip. It was about a week, and we were going to go hiking in Maine. We don't often have opportunities to take a week off, so we took it, and we drove up to New Hampshire and dropped the kid off, and then went on up to Maine. And now, while we were doing that, the city was working on a water main. Took out the entire street and were relaying new pipes for a water main. I guess they were replacing old lead pipes, something like that. I'm not sure. But they had been working on it for about a week before we left, and then continue, I suppose, working on it all the way down the road while we were gone. Now, as soon as we left, turned everything off, didn't turn off the water main. Because I never thought to turn off the water main. I never had a problem before. But apparently, according to my neighbor, who texted us that something was wrong, there was water leaking. And it wasn't a small leak either. It was like there was water leaking. The sump pump was blasting water out from down here out to the street constantly. And it was even too much for the sump pump. It had overloaded that. And so that was now flooding the yard going down to the street, and it was very noticeable. So he figured, something's wrong, and he texted us. Problem is that we were hiking, and we didn't have any signal. And so for a week, he's texting us, and we're not replying because we're not getting the texts. Anyway, so it turns out that it's the riser pipe. So in the back of a toilet, right? You've got the copper line that comes up, and then you've got the flexible tube with the on-off valve that goes directly into the bowl, which feeds the filler. That's the thing that broke. Let me show you the pipe. All right, that's the pipe. See, that's a metal end. This is a plastic end. And this snapped, cracked, under pressure, right? I can only imagine, there's no way to prove it, but I can only imagine that whatever they were doing to repressurize the pipes put too much pressure in our lines, and because we weren't here to constantly be using the water and reduce the pressure in the house, this thing snapped and was leaking for a week. Now, it wasn't just leaking, it was shooting up, and water came down through the floor and spread out everywhere. The entire floor down here was demolished. I had acoustic tile on the ceilings, panels on the walls, things like that, and it all came down. My guitars were mounted onto the walls, and they came crashing down because the sheetrock just turned to mud, and the paint was sitting there bubbling up with water in it, and all the water came across here and just fell right on. So room layout, and I'll show you pictures. I had my desk here, the console with the DMXR 100 and the 6 patch bays. The Neve was over here. This side got completely demolished. Water everywhere. You'll see it in the pictures. Over here, tape machine was in the corner. That got wet. This area here with the 2 roving racks didn't get water on it. It was damp in here, obviously, because there was about 6 inches of water on the ground. But it didn't get directly splashed. So the gear that was in these 2 racks was able to be salvaged. Now, of course, these acoustic tiles are made from, pressed paper. I guess like Kodak backing pressed paper. And that turned to soup, and that was everywhere. I had all my wiring was gone. All my patch bays were just gone, rusted. All the bantam points were just nothing you could do. They were rusted, closed. And there's no way, with a patch bay, there's no way to get in there. It's one thing to take a male 1/4 inch or a male bantam cable and clean the ends. There's no way to get inside of a female patch point. It's just not doable. I tried to cut off the ends, and I figured, wow, the cable's sheathed, double, triple sheathed, and this Mogami cable is so nice. It's really flexible, and it's just gorgeous. And I figured, well, let me cut off the ends, and at least I'll save a little money by rewiring with the same cable. But somehow inside the sheathing was wet. I mean, the desk, the R100 was completely full of water. When I lifted it, which is not easy to do if you've ever owned one of those things, it's heavy. But when I lifted it, it just poured water all over the ground. It was gone. There was no saving it. And that hurt. What did I mix on that thing? At least 3 or 4 gold records and a platinum. And it was gone. Just gone. Forget it. My Emax 2 keyboard, you can't find those. I've looked everywhere. You can't find them. The Neve Prism Rack, the VR, 5 channels of a Neve VR. I was thoroughly convinced. Now, this one's been repaired. I was thoroughly convinced that was never going to be found again. But it took a lot of work to get this thing repaired, and it wasn't cheap. But it's 5 channels of a Neve VR, so it's not like something. I'll just replace that with something else. No, you can't. It's a VR. So, and the sump pump was gone. That had given up. Now the electrical box didn't get. Now that could have been bad, but it didn't. Nothing happened to that, so that was good. So all the walls had to come down. The walls that hadn't come down on their own. Everything had to be cleaned out, and the place had to be dried. That went on for about 2 weeks. And what that process is, if you've ever had a humidifier running, these are industrial humidifiers. So they're about the size of an A800, a big tape machine, or a small, mid-sized refrigerator. And there were 2 down here, 2 upstairs, and 2 on the floor above that. Those things were running 24 hours a day with hoses going outside. And they are loud. I mean, we're talking like 100 dB minimum each. So that's going on. Meanwhile, all the doors and passageways have plastic on it, so you can't move from room to room. And there's no real way to, it's gross in here anyway. And then when that happened, the wood flooring warped to look like this mangled mess. So all the wood flooring had to be taken up. And this house was built in 1945, right after World War II was completed. And so all the wood flooring was original oak hardwood flooring. It was good stuff too. So all of that had to go, which left thousands of nails, the old style nails, just sticking up. So you couldn't walk around there until one day I just eventually couldn't deal with it anymore. And I took up every single nail. It took me, I don't know, like 6 hours. Mold is the big thing that you have to worry about. There was mold everywhere. So everything had to be dried out. Then it had to be sprayed to kill anything that was remaining. Then you had to wait. Then the floor tiles, wherever there were floor tiles, those had to be taken up. So I'm down here with a mask on and the respirator and the whole thing, getting rid of that. Everything had to, I've got a shop over here. Most of that was damaged, but this door was so warped because it was just waterlogged that we couldn't get through the door for days. There was just no way to pry the door off. So I couldn't tell whether or not the shop is in there. I couldn't tell whether or not the shop was together, not together, nothing. And there's no way to get through the other way because that's like a double security police locked Bilco door. So there's no way to get through there. $3 pipe. This is a $3 pipe. I found this out later on. I don't want to jump ahead because we'll talk about the insurance companies later. But I found out later on that 80% of non-flood, because flood's different. You need flood insurance for floods. We're not in a flood zone. 80% of all claims is due to this pipe. Now, it seems to me that if I were an insurance company and I knew that a $3.50 pipe would prevent 80% of all insurance claims, especially ones that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, that I would go to or require each one of my insured to replace these pipes. But they don't do that. They don't say anything about it. And it kind of makes you wonder why. Okay, so now everything's dried out and I've got an empty studio floor. The whole thing is just, it's cleaned up. It's a mess, but it's cleaned up. And there's wires hanging down and the rafters are exposed and the whole thing. Now I've got to go through the process of rebuilding. And we will talk about rebuilding the studio in the next video. You've got acoustics to deal with. You've got to maximize the amount of space that you've got. This is not the biggest floor in the world. So I wanted a nice control room set up where I could also record whatever in the room and have clients in the room. I didn't want it to be too compact, but then you got to fall within a budget too. So the things that we're going to talk about going forward are setting up the acoustics of the room, replacing vintage gear with new gear, going from a console and working with a console where, you can just see everything. Working with a console is very different from working in the box. I can sit there and look at 96 channels on a Neve or an SSL and get a sense of what the mix sounds like without even listening to it. So going from a console to a hybrid setup was quite a thing for me. It was very difficult to do, and there's a lot to think about. Your interface is your I/O is going to be the most important thing that you think about, simply because when it all came down to it, before the desk was the center, not only of your workflow, but of the patch bay. Everything was desk related. So everything else has to patch around in a new way. That'll make more sense once we get into it. And this is the most important thing that we're going to talk about, dealing with the insurance company, because once this whole process started, this became my full-time job. So the thing that we want to do is to make it so that you minimize any damage that happens before it happens. You don't want to get into a situation where you have to now discuss and negotiate value of vintage materials. There is no set value. You can't just pull up Amazon or Sweetwater or Guitar Center or wherever it may be and say, well, look, here's the price. If I want to replace something, here's the price. You can't do that because it's 50, 60, 70-year-old piece of gear. And so that becomes very difficult. And they're going to look at it and go, yeah, but that's a 50, 60, 70-year-old piece of gear. It can't be worth anything. And that's exactly the opposite. No, it is because it's a 50, 60, 70-year-old piece of gear that it's actually valuable and not replaceable and so unique. So that's what we're going to talk about in the in coming videos. And hopefully this will be valuable to you, because I wish I had known any of this stuff before all this damage happened. And we want to minimize anything that happens to you before it happens, or God forbid, if it does happen, then get you through the process properly. All right, so that's coming up in the next few weeks, and I hope I know it's a rant, but it's been a long time, and this was difficult. So I want to thank you for sitting here and listening to me go on and on and on. But hopefully you'll get some value out of what's coming up in the next few weeks.